Hello, thank you for joining us. This is Miro Consulting's webinar on 8 ways you're overspending on Salesforce. We're going to begin in just a moment. We're just going to give everyone a chance to log in. Thanks. Hello again. This is the Miro Consulting webinar on 8 ways you're overspending on Salesforce. We're going to begin the presentation in just a moment. We're just going to give everyone a chance to log in. Thanks. All right. Thank you for joining us. This is Miro Consulting's webinar, 8 ways you are overspending on Salesforce. My name is Sean Donahue. I am the host of this event, and I am also the VP of Marketing here at Miro Consulting. Okay. A little bit about who we are before I start. Miro Consulting, we're the global leading provider of software asset management and subscription management services for Oracle, Microsoft, IBM, Amazon Web Services, and Salesforce. We specialize in license management, audit advisory, negotiation tactics, support management, and cloud services. Our mission is pretty simple. We want to help our clients maximize their ROI on their software license and subscription investments, stay in compliance, and negotiate a successful contracts and audit settlements. And the best part of all is there's no risk in working with Miro. Our performance guarantee is that the amount of cost savings we uncover will be more than our fees. No one else gives that guarantee in our industry. So you can take away there is there's no risk working with us on a project because we guarantee we have a performance guarantee. All right, let's talk about what is our executive summary for today. We're going to talk about active users who aren't really active. We're going to talk about unassigned user licenses, unused feature licenses, over-licensed users, underactive users, non-user usage fees, adoption and rollout failures, and finally, renewal mistakes. All right, so what sort of prompted us to come up with this presentation is a situation we saw with one of our clients that we caught in time when they were looking at their Salesforce renewal. So during the discussion within the company who was doing the renewing, at one point their procurement team who was leading the renewal sent an email to their IT team saying, how many active users do we have? Salesforce was proposing moving from, it was about 1,000 users to about 1,500 users. So when procurement asked IT came back and said, we have 900 active users. So procurement thought, okay, we're almost out of licenses. Sounds like a good time to buy more because they thought they only had about 50 licenses left unassigned. What we found out was in reality, about 400 of those active licenses were assigned to users who weren't logging in, rarely logged in. And when they did log in, they didn't do very much. So in other words, were they really active? Well, what is an active user? Well, it turns out, and trust me, I looked forever, there is no official Salesforce definition of an active user. Nowhere, anywhere. Because if there was, you might find out some things that maybe you weren't aware of before. And what that really is, active is just a checkbox on a user's profile page. It basically means a user can log in and a user can have new things assigned to their ownership. They can hold things if they're not active, but they can't be assigned something to ownership of something if they're not active. That's basically it. That's all active user means. What it does not mean, and this is very important, doesn't mean they've ever actually created or edited any records, which you would think of as activity. They may not have logged in for years. We have seen this. They just simply leave the organization. The organization never deactivates them, or they simply just stop using the system. They get reassigned, all kinds of things. They may no longer work at your organization. They may have left. We've seen situations where people left years and years ago and they just never got deactivated for various reasons. The admin didn't realize they were supposed to, or it wasn't anyone's assigned job duty because they didn't need any more licenses, so they were just going to get it deactivate people later because they thought if they just freeze people, well, that's all they really need to do. So in fact, you could have active users, people who are termed an active user, they've never logged in once, not one time. And that can be considered an active user according to Salesforce's perceived definition and what it says on the back end. So it's that miscommunication that really prompted us to look into this and say, wow, what else is going on here? Well, you might ask yourself, why would I even have active users or active? And the answer is it's a bunch of different reasons. You probably already have too many licenses because so you didn't need to take them away from people who didn't need them or weren't using them. It could be one that you purchased but is never been assigned to anybody. So it's completely unused license. It may have been assigned to someone and then taken away, and now it's not assigned to anybody. And pretty much an unused license, which is what we see the most, is the most common way you will be wasting money with Salesforce. And it happens very simple. Salesforce convinces you that you're going to have a fast rollout and everyone at your organization is going to use it and you're going to be migrating from your old system real fast. And you really need all these licenses right away to really get the best business. And and if you buy the most licenses, well, we'll give you the biggest discount. How many of you have been there? So I said, why would you have them? Well, it didn't go the way Salesforce optimistically helped you, understand it may go. So you might have had rollout and adoption delays. We've seen organizations that have taken a year. Their start date was day one, and a year later they have no active users. They have no successful migration. They're dead in the water. They paid for a year of nothing. The big reason, of course, is Salesforce's account rep pretty much convinces you. He dangles that big carrot in front of you and says, just buy another couple hundred, another couple thousand, another couple tens of thousand, and we'll give you a bigger discount. And that, if you're a procurement team, especially, those discounts can get very, very attractive. And you start thinking, well, this is how I get the most for my money. And at the end, does that procurement person really have a grasp of how fast things are going to roll out? Does the IT team really have a grasp of how fast something's going to migrate? And that's what it kind of comes down to is that Salesforce will always encourage you to be absolutely optimistic on how many you should buy and how fast you should buy them. And we've even seen teams, instances where there was a provision where there was a guy in IT's job. Every time someone was on board at the company, his job was to go buy them a new Salesforce license using the checkout back end. And this surprises procurement people all the time. Yes, there's something in the back end of Salesforce that they can buy more licenses without getting your permission, without any sort of approval. So keep that in mind. If you all of a sudden see yourself with many more licenses than your contracts that you bought a few years ago. And this IT person, at one point, that was a proper thing for them to do because they were out of Salesforce licenses. So every time the person came on board, they really did need to buy another license. But at some point, the contract renewed and the organization bought a whole bunch more licenses. That IT guy, nobody told him that he was supposed to stop his process. So he just kept buying licenses. And they ended up with many, many more than they needed. And there's no giving them back. And it could be not your fault at all. We've had organizations that have come to us and said, this was during COVID. Hey, I just had to lay off 50% of my team. What do? I got 50% of my licenses I'm not using. I'm in the middle of a contract. What do I do? And I tell them, I'm sorry, there's nothing you can do. You're in the middle of this. You agreed to the purchase. Salesforce does not reduce license counts in the middle of a contract. That simply does not happen. Unless you go bankrupt, they'll give you a bit of a break, but otherwise it's nothing. So that's why we want to put this presentation together to sort of push back against that a little and say, no, really do a deep dive on how many you actually need. And I want to give you an example that I think will make this a little bit more clear, especially when you look at more of the details, because this is what you'll tend to see first. So take a look at company A and company B, right? They're both thinking they need somewhere between 500 and 1,000 licenses. They're not quite sure how many they're going to need over the course of the term. The license they're looking at is a $200 list price license. And guys, if you're trying to figure out which products they are, they're not any products. I'm just using round numbers to make this a little easier to see. So company A, they go for the big discount. They say, I'll purchase more and, for the bigger discount. Company B says, we're going to be a little more conservative. We're going to pay that higher price. We're going to get less of a discount, but we're going to get less licenses overall. We're more confident. We're definitely going to get all these rolled out. And keep in mind, you can always buy more. You can always buy more. You can never buy less. So, with your company fee here, if it turned out to be 600 or 700 or 750, you could just go buy more of those licenses. Clearly, you wouldn't have gotten the best discount, but it's not like you couldn't get them. So company A purchases 1,000, company B purchases 500. You can see the total price there, 100,000 versus 75, right? But let's say that the conservative estimate was the more correct one. Well, both companies only ever ended up using 500 licenses. And let me tell you, most of the time we see a range of estimation when a company's trying to decide, should I buy more or less licenses? They would have almost always done better buying less. And that's one of the reasons we put this together, because that's what happens a lot of the time. Is you can see here that if you only ended up using half of those licenses, which is a very common scenario, take a look at that last line. What's a real discount after utilization? And that's one of the things I really want you to take away from this, is that what's really your important number here is your discount after you figure out utilizations. A discount after you say, well, did I actually use all my licenses? And you can see when you do the math, by not using half their licenses, they actually got a discount of 0 for company A. Company B obviously got less of a discount, but they can always buy more licenses if they need it. Whereas company A cannot give those licenses back, but it gets worse. And this is where I think a lot of organizations don't realize how much of a worse scenario it is when you overspend. Because some things in Salesforce world are actually built on your total contract price. That includes things like support. It includes things like Shield. There's a bunch of others, but they're the ones that are most common. Shield's their cybersecurity component, if you're unfamiliar. So if you take a look at it, once those extra costs are factored in, well, now company A is paying extra percentage for support and for security of licenses they're not using, whereas company B isn't paying anything for licenses they're not using. So this is the example I really want to make sure you see out there, that you got to go with your utilization. You got to look at what you're utilizing, not what you owned, and don't get seduced by that big discount. It makes companies overpurchase, and Salesforce is the king of helping you buy more than you need. Of course, all major software vendors would love to help you buy more than you really need, but Salesforce is very, very good at it. It doesn't mean that they're against you. It doesn't mean they're trying to, they're not trying to screw you over. Salesforce is a good company. We're very pro Salesforce. It's just that they're incentivized to sell you more than they need. They're incentivized to be as optimistic as they could possibly be. So let's talk about some other types of users that you may not be thinking about, like your underactive user. Well, you can have a user who's never logged in, not once. You can have users who logged in once to confirm their email address 7 years ago and haven't logged in since. Like I said, you can have ones that have logged in. They have logged in, but years ago. We've seen one where we talked to an organization. They said, yeah, all of our users log in at least every 3 months. It turned out, well, that's how often the system prompted them to change their password. And a very large portion of them were logging in, changing their password, logging back right back out again. You have users who maybe it's appropriate, maybe it's not, but they might log in once a month, look at a report, and that's it. Where you could have gotten that report to them in a much better way that you wouldn't have needed a license. You could have users who, yeah, they log in, maybe they look around, but they never actually create or edit any data. And then the question is, do they even really need to log in to look at that data if they're not doing anything with it? And then finally, the most classic example some of you will probably be familiar with is, the sales team who only enters their opportunities once they're closed. So it turns out to be little more than your accounting software in terms of tracking your sales activity, because they don't put anything in the system until it's at the very end. You could have the opposite. You could have an over-licensed user. Typically, an over-licensed user has the standard user license. If you thought that that's the only license there was, there isn't. There's many other licenses besides the standard user license. And typically, this will be the type of user who has access to objects, many objects they don't need. They might be an administrative user, for example, who doesn't really need to know what opportunities the company has. They really only need to know if the company, if the company in the system has any opportunities at the moment. That's a classic example. Another one we give is a development team. We see development teams who have standard licenses when really maybe one person on that development team needed a standard license to check occasionally if something worked, whereas the rest of the development team didn't need that at all. They only needed developer type access, which was 20% of the cost. And even we've seen organizations that you can get your own custom licenses. You go to Salesforce and say, I want a license that lets my user access these things. Give me a price. Well, if you ask for something reasonable, they will come back and give you a reasonable price. If they think, I don't say the price is reasonable, but they'll give you a custom license based on your exact needs. Again, if you come to them with a crazy request, they're not going to do it. But if it's something normal, they'll make something just for you. And finally, the one we see here is the over licensed user. They've got a lot of add-ons access that they don't need. Classic example that we give for this is a sales team who has access to the lightning dialer and never uses the lightning dialer. And there are many other things like that where the organization went out, they purchased certain features thinking their teams would use it, and their teams are not, in fact, using it. So they're paying for nothing. And what I want to talk about, some of these feature licenses is what they're called. Some of them are normal. Some of them is normal to have many unused feature licenses. Perfect example that almost everyone I've ever seen has is a type called marketing user. Another type is flow user, for example. If you're a service cloud user, service cloud user. These types of feature licenses just enable some extra stuff. They come for free with your Salesforce, regular Salesforce instance. It is perfectly normal to have many of them unassigned. So if you see that, and we've had organizations say, "Oh, Salesforce really screwed me. They sold me all these feature licenses I'm not using." Well, that's normal. You're not really actually paying for those. They're more or less just permission sets. So not every unused feature license is a problem. It's very common for some. You're going to have tons. You might not even use half of the ones you have because they give you too many in some cases. But other times not. Sometimes some feature license, like I said with the dialer, you're paying for it. So let's go, I mentioned which ones those are. So if you're wondering where to look for that, check your go into the setup of Salesforce, check your company information. And you will see all these unassigned feature licenses that you have, and you can take a look and you can Google them, or if you already know what they are, you can see which ones you don't care if they're unassigned and which ones you're paying for and you don't want to. All right, what's not a feature license that's also not a user license? Well, that would be an add-on license. So add-on licenses are typically the ones you are going to be paying for. And I don't want to say every instance, but almost every instance. Add-on licenses are also not frequently discounted. So some of those things, like I said earlier, Lightning Dialer, CPQ, Service Location, Einstein. There's a 50-page manual. I have it here. I'll send it to you afterward, where you can look all these up, what they do. It's real useful for when you're looking through your Salesforce instance, if you have a lot of instances, or you're new to the organization, you weren't sure what was purchased initially, what is this thing and what does it do? There's a great guide for that Salesforce puts out. Now, how do these failures happen? We were talking earlier about these rollout failures. And here I've given a standard industry, basically, roadmap is what we'd call them, to something like a migration or starting up. Very few organizations have no CRM at this point. So sometimes they're moving to Salesforce. Sometimes they're rolling it out. Sometimes they had no CRM. But what typically happens is the organization's IT department doesn't roll out Salesforces all the time. So there's a lack of expertise in planning. Even with some good Salesforce admins, people who have good Salesforce administration, they've never done the rollout. They've never done the migration aspect of it. And that's where we see the biggest failures. Usually it's organizations where their data is stored in a way or formatted in a way that is not friendly to the way Salesforce is set up. We see a lot of, like I said, overestimation of need. We see people who definitely, Salesforce convinces them they're going to use more licenses if they are. Training is another one. Training is also one of the biggest issues where you give somebody a license, you set up the whole development environment for them. You set up everything ready to go, and you find that they don't know how to use it and they're not sure what to do. And your training isn't getting them there. And Salesforce's training is not customized enough to your particular business need and use case. And all of a sudden, you sort of lose momentum, and then it just stalls completely. We've seen organizations on their third project management team. And a lot of times it's because the right people aren't involved to begin with. The right, procurement will manage a deal, legal will purchase a deal with procurement, and all of a sudden, the IT team wasn't really brought in, or somebody junior was brought in who really didn't participate much. These are the common causes. And that's the lack of buy-in. And the other big one we see is renewal mistakes. That's another place people are wasting money. And by far, the biggest thing people do is they wait too long. They wait too long to start that renewal process on their internal side. And all of a sudden, Salesforce is pressuring them to renew early and putting a deal in front of them, and they don't know where they are. They don't know their real usage. They don't know how many of these users really need a license? Do they really need the expensive license that they do? And they don't have enough time. And that's a Salesforce strategy. They will almost always come to you and try to get you to take some sort of deal for early renewal because they don't want you to start that process that looks into actual usage. A lot of organizations don't realize what an uplift they're going to get. If you signed a first-time contract, say 3 years ago, and you got some whopping discount, let's say you got 50%, right? 3 years ago, well, you might renew for much more money. That was your renewal. That was your pricing for that was your first time round pricing. You may go up and lose half of that discount. You may lose more than half of that discount at renewal, and they'll just tell you, hey, you're still getting a discount off of list rates, and that's true, you would be, but not the giant discount you got on the first time round, especially if you're not buying anything new and they have no leverage. Like I said, not measuring your usage is a big mistake organizations make that leads to most of the rest of them. A lot of organizations have no plan B. So I ask them all the time, if Salesforce puts a number in front of you that is outrageous and you don't want it, it's not in your budget, what's your plan B? And they don't have one. They have no plan B whatsoever. And that's mistaken. Let me tell you, Salesforce knows. If you tell Salesforce, oh yeah, if you don't give me a good price, I'm going to leave. Yeah, they know full well if you're ready to leave or not. They know everything about you. Have you done anything to migrate? They'll know. So like I say, don't try to bluff Salesforce. They're too smart for that. Don't tell them you are in the process of leaving when you've done nothing. They will know. They don't look at your data, but they never promise not to look at your metadata. So they're not, so they use your usage. They've got a good finger on the pulse of your usage, even if you don't. A lot of organizations mess up terms and conditions, whether it's payment terms and conditions, usage terms and conditions, different rights in case you need to get different products. There is a lot you should get there that is not standard, but Salesforce will give it to you if you just simply ask. And many organizations make the mistake of either they don't ask or they ask for it using the wrong words. And if you use the wrong words, Salesforce will tell and turn you down. But if you give Salesforce something that is a pre-approved, we've seen it before, we've seen the same language over and over again, we know it's going to sail through. We can help you with that and help you understand what language is Salesforce going to accept and what are they not. You should have leverage. If you can make a net new purchase, that's great leverage. If you can make a net new purchase of something Salesforce wants to sell you, like for right now, it's MuleSoft, you can make a really good deal. So if you have, one of the big mistakes is if you have functionality that is sitting with a different product, that you could use a Salesforce product instead for the same or let's say similar rates, you move that over, all of a sudden now you've got leverage. Don't buy the wrong product. We have seen it many times. Most commonly organizations that can't decide between Community Cloud and Partner Cloud, and they have new names now that escape me. They just changed their names a few weeks ago, but most of you probably still know them as Partner and Community Clouds. So don't buy the wrong one. We see that very frequently because they misunderstand the scenario they're going to use them. Don't get rushed into an early renewal that you're not ready for, and most importantly, have a software asset management policy. That is one of the biggest mistakes we see with all vendors. It doesn't just apply to Salesforce. You should have a policy where, for example, only one person at your organization is designated to talk to Salesforce. So that one person is the only source of information that Salesforce gets from your company, because they'll call around. They'll call all different people in your organization. They call my CEO, they call my director of sales, they call my CIO. They just want to chat and get some information. So if you are in the process of a renewal, make sure that your junior admin isn't talking to his buddy over at Salesforce. Yeah, no, we're not going anywhere. No, we're not. We have no plans to migrate, because they'll ask. All right, with that is everything I had. I want to go see if we had any questions that popped up during today's event. We had none that come up. So I will give you the most common question I get, which is, how do I save money? My next renewal is coming up. I want to get a better deal out of Salesforce. What do I do? And we say, start early. Start early, see what you can move, see what you can drop. Don't drop things in the middle of a contract. For example, you'll re-trigger pricing changes, and know your leverage. Basically, have leverage. Plan to get leverage. You do those things, you'll have a lot better experience. You don't, you wait to the last minute, you don't do anything, you won't get nearly as good of a deal. So with that, I will end the webinar. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.